Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jonathan with Fishing with Faith Outdoors. This is my buddy Brick, and we're going to give y'all a firing demonstration. So, Brick, we're going to flip the camera around and we'll get at it.
Very good. Load by the 9 times. Load. Handle. Cartridge. Tear. Cartridge. Charge. Cartridge. Draw. Rammer. Ram. Cartridge. Return. Ram. Prime. Shoulder, arms. Left, face. Ready. Aim. Fire. Ready. Aim. Fire. Recover. Arms. Shoulder. Arms.
Awesome, brother. Now, explain to the audience, why did they go through those rounds or the routine of doing that and the purpose of discipline?
So the purpose in discipline in the Army goes back to a millennium, back even towards the Greeks and the hoplites into the Romans. Each movement was timed, it was paced. It was a constant motion every other time, and these soldiers were drilled almost every other day on what to do, whether it be marching orders, whether it be the manual arms, how they held their rifle, how they fired their rifle. This was all in place to be able to instruct a soldier on how to become, a disciplined man and a well-fought soldier in the Army, whichever side.
Right, and they did that on both sides, Confederate and Federal?
Yes, they basically studied both manuals. There's several different manuals as far as the infantry goes. Confederates within this point in time during the war would have used Hardee's manual, infantry tactics.
In this time period we portray is what, 63?
1864.
1864.
Okay. That manual was made 1862. Now, for the Federal Army, we would use Casey's manual of infantry tactics. But it was pretty much the same all throughout the war. They were using what's known as Napoleonic tactics. Line fighting, firing and volley, basically massive lines and ranks of men going out on an open field. This was pretty much prominent during the beginning of the war. However, by the latter part of the war, most likely after Gettysburg, the Confederate Army realized that they were fighting a defensive war. After losing that battle, which was more of their offensive attack on Gettysburg, they realized after losing that battle that they would have to be more on the defense. So you would have more, this is where we honestly see the first images of trench warfare. You've had dugout positions, breastworks, and things like that, where soldiers would be able to hold behind and make a defensive position against an offensive opponent.
And a lot of those trench tactics went into World War I as well.
Yes. Like I said, this was more or less the first time that they saw trench warfare. In my opinion, the Civil War was more or less the predecessor and the realization for not just the United States, but for just the world, that we were getting more into modern warfare.
Right, absolutely correct.
We were using tactics that were pretty much outdated by the 1820s. Napoleon, like I said, Napoleonic tactics. These were implemented during when Napoleon was in power. And technology has changed during that point in time. We went from using flint rock flintlock muskets that fired shots maybe about 50, 100 yards, to rifled muskets like my Enfield here, that was rifled within the barrel, that could shoot at least about 300 to 400 yards.
Okay, great.
Accurately.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Accurately. And just the cannons and everything like that, they were rifled as well, and they could shoot almost 2 miles or so.
So average soldier, what was his range? Average soldier in line, what would he aim for? When would they start firing?
They were pretty much aiming low. So like I said, the rifle could shoot at least about 400, 400 yards accurately. And they were pretty much, if you were in maybe about 500, 600 yard distance between you and the enemy, you're pretty much hitting kneecaps. Aim small, miss small, right?
Right.
So you aim it right there for the kneecap. And just the trajectory of that bullet and the elevation and everything like that, it would have been able to go over there and make it that accurate shot. They realized it was going to be a bloody war. And like I said, they started using more of those trench warfare, like I said. This was also a war that was the first time that they used underground mines. One instance was over there at Fort McAllister in Brunswick, Georgia, where Confederates that were in place in that fort placed underground torpedo mines in a span of about 300, 400 yards where these Federals were charging. And that's what really gave them that casualty for the Federal lines. That's why they had so many casualties, because of those mines. And Sherman, who was already creating atrocities throughout the war, saw this and was like, all right, this ain't right. I don't like this. And made the POWs, Confederate POWs, dig out those mines. So by the latter part of the war, they realized that this wasn't going to be the average, oh, if I die, I'm going to be well dressed. It didn't become that war. It became a very dirty and bloody and terrifying war. It was probably one, if not the darkest times, the terrifying times in this country's history.
Yeah, a lot of men were left on the battlefield to rot.
Oh yeah, and
later their bones were picked up and buried. And
you have pretty much about 600,000 soldiers on both sides are gone. 3% of America's population was gone because of the war between the states. And that's something, as far as us reenactors, we try to let people see this. For me, I believe that what we do reenacting wise is we give people a first person, what's the word perspective.
Perspective, yes.
Yeah, first person. We give them a first person perspective on history, on how they look, how they would have fought, what they would have ate, how they would have slept, what they would have done during the war. And we also not just, remember these men and, make sure that their memory is alive for both sides. But this is something that we try to tell people, as far as I'm a strong believer of history repeating itself. And the way the country is and the way that everything is now,
it's basically heading kind of in that direction, minus the slavery.
And for us, we try to teach this history and show people, hey, this really dark and terrible time in our nation's history, it happened. Let's not let it happen again.
Yeah, you can see how terrible it was then, and now look at the modern rifles and equipment we have now compared to what they had then. It can be 10 times worse.
Right, exactly.
And and me and you, we both have Confederate ancestors. Yet we do put on the blue because it gives everybody else a greater perspective and enlighten everybody on what we was fighting against. Our ancestors, Confederate, were fighting against.
So in this point in time, here in Clinton, you had the army, you had Sherman's army coming through. When Sherman left Atlanta, they basically split the army in two. You had the Army of Tennessee going towards around Macon and here in Clinton, Georgia, while the Army of Georgia was going towards Milledgeville, the capital of Georgia at that point in time. The Army of the Tennessee was made up of the 15th and 17th Army Corps, and the Army of Georgia was made up of the 14th and 20th Army Corps. And these were guys that were basically weren't given rations. Sherman's cut their supplies and everything like that for about 2 months during the war, or during the March to the Sea. At this point in time, they would have looked nasty, they would look gross, they would have had tears and different alterations in their jacket. They basically look how I look, to where we were able to take over basically make ourselves feel comfortable with the environment. Which Georgia at that point in time was hot and dusty. That's why I'm wearing my boots and my hat, so I keep the sun out of my face and the dust out of my shoes. They were pretty much a ragtag bunch once they got to Savannah. In fact, Sherman would be quoted in saying that my men looked more like day laborers than soldiers.
And that's when Sherman came into Georgia, which the Confederates would have been better supplied than the Federals in Georgia because of the Atlanta Arsenal.
Right, and that's what their objective was. Their objective was to go and attack any kind of structure that would have been able to help not just the military, but the war effort. Here in Clinton, we had about 500 and something structures all around this area. And it wasn't until Sherman came through that now, as of today, we only have 13. It was one of the largest communities here in Georgia at that point in time, but it wasn't until Sherman came and saw those objectives, because they would see farmland and different houses and stuff like that. They would be able to help out with the war effort. So Sherman made a general order. It was General Field Order number 120 that gave the soldiers legality to go and forage and harvest through livestock and everything within the civilian population. And however, individual officers of different companies would be able to give an order if they saw any aggression from the civilians. They would be able to give that order to use force to go in the house and reap what they see fit, and would have been supplied for the men. Because again, these guys hadn't had food or anything like that for almost 2 months, so they were basically living off the land, and what it's called now a total war strategy.
And that was Sherman's goal, was to make Georgia house.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
if the South had won the war, Sherman would have been hung for war crimes?
I would see that, yeah, because for the most part, for what Sherman did, and this is pretty much a touchy subject and much of controversy, it wasn't really as far as what Sherman did, is what Sherman's men did. We all hold Sherman accountable for what he did, but it's also what his men did, what the individuals did.
Right, he couldn't control every regiment, every platoon.
Exactly, he had his men all spread thin throughout the state. So as far as what they did, it was truly something to basically rate the state of Georgia. And as far as for what we portray, I love to be able to portray the Federal Army and Sherman's boys, because it doesn't, for us reenactors, take pride in their authenticity and being able to look the part of a soldier. You take pride in being able to go out there and show what these men did because of that authenticity, to actually give people that immersion of what those civilians and what those soldiers on the other side felt.
And
what they saw these guys.
Right, and what better way to honor and represent our Confederate ancestors is both of share to portray and do as the Federal troop would have done,
right,
to the T as much as possible, to honor them and what they fought against.
Right.
Great odds and able to whip an enemy almost to the end.
Because there are certain reenactments that you see that no matter where you go, whether it be north or south or whatever ideal you share, everyone doesn't want to play the bad guy. So here in the South, predominantly everyone wants to be Confederate because, that's just their heritage. That's what they believe in and everything like that. And for most battles here in the state of Georgia, the Federal Army outnumbered the Confederate forces from 3-1. And they, when you go to a reenactment around here, or a mainstream reenactment, what we call mainstream reenactment, it doesn't make sense when you have 200-something Confederates against, about 50 Federals. I like showing those numbers because it's an accurate portrayal of what those men saw.
And it looks
what they
better.
did. And it looks better.
Right.
It looks better as far as the authenticity and be able to interpret what we do and what we're trying to share and teach the public.
And on top of that, when Sherman got into Atlanta, the Confederates were putting up such a hard fight, overwhelming odds of the Federal troops, that Sherman literally had to keep outflanking them
Exactly.
to try to whip them.
Exactly.
All right, Mr. Brick, I appreciate your time.
Thank you so
and
much.
thank you so much for talking to the viewers, and God bless, and we'll see you at the next one.
Very much appreciated. Thank you.